Hi friends, welcome back to another video / episode of the James Red Podcast. Today I have a guy here named Tommy Reynolds. Reynolds?
Yes, yeah, Reynolds.
Like
yeah.
How would you say that? Okay, great.
Yeah.
I get very timid about last names. Yeah.
Do you know what? It's how I know that people are selling me something on the phone, because they say, "Can I speak to Mr. Reynolds, please?" I'm like, yeah. What are you going to sell to me now? Yeah, it's because it's the Y in my surname that throws people off. It should be R-E-N. It's like I've got a silent Y in my name. But sorry, carry on.
I get Reed a lot.
Do you? Okay.
Yes, which makes absolutely no sense to me. I can't understand it because it's two D's. I don't understand how that makes an E sound.
No, it doesn't.
I would think red, but not read.
Just someone with a stutter.
Yeah, right. And that's perfectly acceptable because the letters are actually there. I'll never figure this out. Maybe I'll ask God this when I die. But anyway, so for Tommy, first off, he is a YouTube creator, and according to his Instagram account, he is a photographer, a storyteller, a speaker, and an avocado lover. And he creates very lovely environmental portraits, but he also seems to know his way around a studio as well. On his channel, he creates videos about all sorts of photography-related things, and there was one time he almost didn't make it out of Ethiopia alive, and we'll talk about that more very shortly. But I will link below to his things. He is a very interesting creator, and thank you for taking the time, Tommy. How are you doing today?
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. No, I'm doing great. Thanks ever so much for asking me to be on this show. I've, as I said to you just a moment ago, it's the first time I've ever been asked to do one of these things. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited.
I told him, I hope it's a dream come true. I really, I hope he sleeps better tonight because of this conversation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is a peak right now. This is a moment. I need to get this on. I need to take an Instagram of this moment right now and remember it forever.
Yes. Save it, share it with everyone you can, send it into competitions, see if you can win it for most compelling emotional story. That sort of thing. Okay, well, first off, before we kind of get into talking about your creative journey and where you're at right now and where you've been and all this sorts of fun stuff, where can people find you if they want to?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Tommy Reynolds 89 and on Twitter with the same handle, and on Facebook, Tommy Reynolds Photography, and YouTube, just type Tommy Reynolds and then tommyreynolds.co.uk if you want my official website.
Beautiful. That was quick and concise. I like that.
Thanks, man.
It's hard to keep all your things organized on the internet.
No, I purposely changed my Twitter so that you know how when you get your handle and it's never you might not have your name, so you got to throw on the number, which is what I did with Instagram. And with Twitter and the others, I actually changed it to 89 because I wanted it to be consistent, because then it's just easier. So then it's just easier to, as I just did, just dish out all your socials. So it's a little bit easier.
Right. Oh, I feel like it's a little bit more forgivable to have not the perfect name that's consistent across the board than a perfect name here and then one over here that has 6470 at the end.
Yeah, right.
And then this other one's like, Tommy loves whales.
Exactly.
Potato. So, okay.
I do like potatoes though.
Well, it's an idea. Just look into that.
Yes. I mean, I'll add an account. I'll make a new account, shall I?
Tommy Reynolds potato.
It's just all variations of potato.
Yeah. Potato Reynolds, Tommy Potato. Okay. Hey, so when did you decide, or why did you decide to become a photographer?
So, I'll tell you what this is. I'll give you the real honest answer that I give people when I get asked that. I took it at school because I thought it was going to be a DOS, which over in the UK, DOS means kind of like it's like it'll be easy. I genuinely thought that it was going to be easy. It's got to be better than maths, surely, something like that. So I picked it as an option at school, doing GCSE, which is like, I don't know what it would be over there, but it's before you go to university. And
I guess it's high school.
Yeah, so I picked it and absolutely fell in love with it. I thought it was awesome. The idea of photography, my course itself was a little bit it was a little bit arty-farty in it was more about how you present your work versus actually using the camera. So after high school, after secondary school, I bought my first camera, which was, I can still remember, it was a Fuji Finepix S5 600 bridge camera. That was my very first camera, which I still have somewhere in my room.
You got to keep those things around.
Yeah, I've got a in my studio. I've got a shelf, and I don't have that one, but it's in my room somewhere. But I do have most of my other cameras, like a shelf, like a shrines of like where I've been and where I'm going, which is pretty cool, including some of the film cameras. But yeah, so I started when I was at school, thinking I was going to just, you know, it was going to get away with it and stuff. But I loved it, enjoyed the process, also enjoyed filmmaking as well. And kind of started from there. So I guess I must have been, when I was picking my options, about 11, 12, about 16, 17. That's when I kind of picked up my first camera and progressed from there, really. And I started shooting bands that are in my class or in my school. That's kind of where I first started to do photography, was shooting bands for my friends and stuff.
Was there something that you enjoyed about live music that drew you to that, or was it just the easiest starting point?
Yeah, no, I love going to see live shows, love going to concerts, and this combined those two elements for me. And the music scene in my area at the time was really great. There were some really great bands of my age, and there were lots of in where I'm from in Medway. There were a few places where people my age could put on their own acts and put on their own shows. And I would say, if you let me in free, I'll photograph your band and for free as well. Just give me a mention on Facebook. How about that? And that's kind of how it started. So I got to see the shows for free, didn't have to pay entry, and got to experience it and shoot some cool photos. And then I just became known as the band photographer, that guy that shoots the bands, and still very much interested in shooting live music as well. I dipped my toe into it only for the first time in a while, a few days ago, when I shot Paloma Face. But that is how it started way back, because I just have a love for music as well.
That's fantastic. You really learn what you can get away with if you look like you're supposed to be there when it comes to music photography. Like, I learned what sort of things I could pull off. So I was like, I just hold up the camera and go, "Hey, how's it going?" Just walk by. You're like, I guess he's supposed to. That's supposed to happen.
No, it's so true. It's funny to say. You've just actually reminded me of a memory that when I, again, at the time when I was doing photography, picking up my first camera, I was really overweight and I didn't have an awful lot of confidence. And I know it sounds cheesy, but it really was. It really did give me the confidence to walk up to someone, because I now had an excuse hanging from around my neck. I could actually go up to someone and say, "Hey, my name's Tommy. I just shot your band. Here's a couple of them." And they were like, "Oh, that's cool." And then that's it. Yeah. I've already, the ice has been broken. So I really have a lot to thank for photography for giving me confidence to walk up to people. It gave me an excuse to be more confident. And so, yeah, so that's how I became more confident, is via photography.
That's interesting. Okay, that's cool. So when you were in that zone of just beginning, and maybe even before you began, what were some of your early inspirations in terms of people that made you excited about the craft of photography, if any at all?
In perfectly honest, in my early stages, there wasn't really photographers that I was looking at for inspiration. I was inspired by my subjects, if that makes sense. So my subjects would inspire me. If they put on a good show, it just made me want to work harder to get a good shot. So starting to incorporate off-camera flash at shows, like getting a little stand and putting it behind them, knowing that they were going to give a good show. Or so my drive came from trying to get them excited about the photos that they were going to get. So I would, and also when I direct music videos as well, where I will be talking to my subjects, and if I will be literally shouting at them whilst I'm photographing. I'll go, come on, like I'll like egg them on to look at the camera, go, come on, right here, right. Yeah, like, with these glasses, Austin Powers is a good go-to.
Yes, of course. Of course.
So really, yeah, I guess in all honesty, I have loads of inspirations now, but kind of back then, it was still really new to me, and I didn't know yet if it was going to be my career. So I was inspired by the subjects and the music they were playing, really.
That's interesting. And for me, it's like early on when I was coming up, and I was interested in filmmaking. So I got interested in filmmaking before I got into photography, and specifically documentary filmmaking. I've always loved documentaries. And when I was young, I was growing up and I was homeschooled, I'd sit in my house and watch, whether it was National Geographic or YouTube or whatever, I would sit down and watch documentaries about random stuff that I thought was interesting. And I always loved the format. And so it's like, I always say that, you know, you have the entrepreneurial types who have these stories about starting lemonade stands when they're 1.5 and making, you know, $100,000 from all of their friends. They've turned them into a sort of a franchise. I was watching documentaries. So,
yeah.
And so it's, you know, I think inspiration comes from so many different outlets. It's not, you know, I'm not the best at naming photographers and creators off the top of my head, but I do know films and photographs that have inspired me.
Because I come from, well, my degree is in filmmaking, so I've got a huge love for filmmaking as well, which is why I'm so involved in the editing process of my behind the scenes videos that my friend will shoot for me. And like you, yeah, it was I guess you would call it one of my first loves, because I got into photography and filming at the same time. The only reason I chose to do filmmaking at uni versus photography was I didn't enjoy GCSE or secondary school photography, the course, and I didn't want the university experience to be the same as that, because I was told that the filmmaking course, or this specific course I was looking at, was a lot more hands-on, involved in the production. So that was why I veered off to do filmmaking. And music, again, in films inspires me so much. I love listening to like Epidemic Sounds and Music Bed, because sometimes it's the songs or the pieces of music that inspire an idea. So sometimes it's the music that comes first for me, and not the piece I'm actually making. So it's nice when that happens, because music, so that is another inspiration for me, is the music I'm listening to. And you might feel the same as you're so into kind of more filming yourself, like the documentaries. Oh,
absolutely. I think music is the hardest part of editing, and it is simultaneously, like, it can be the most influential part of telling a story. And when you look at a site like Epidemic, they actually have a lot of very cinematic types of musical pieces on there. And whenever I come across, there are certain ones that I will come across that I don't even want to use because they're so good, and I want to save them until the film that I make a week and a half before I die, because it's
yeah.
Like, I don't even know what to do with it. It's so good, but I'll save it in a playlist and put it over here. And I think for me, some of the most powerful moments in watching any given film that has been inspiring to me is the music and the sound, and how they organize together different sounds to make you feel, you know, anxious or tense. And also, you know, that can happen on a visual level. Like, I think of the film, I think it was 127 hours, I think is the amount of hours that he, so yeah, it's about a guy down in the state where I live, Southern Utah. He climbed down into a slot canyon. He fell, a rock fell on his arm. He got trapped, and he had to saw his own arm off with a dull pocket knife. So just an exciting Friday, but
bless him.
So it's a true story. He got out, he survived amazingly. Incredible story on its own. But there's a movie about it with James Franco. The sound design in this movie was ridiculous. Like, he would like hit a nerve when he was cutting his arm, and you'd just hear this sound, or he would, there's a part where he's walking through the desert after he cut his arm off, What's funny is I haven't even seen the full movie. I've just seen scenes, but
It's a good movie.
he's walking through he's walking through the desert, and everything, the visuals start to make you feel like you're about to pass out with him, and the sound and all of that comes together. And so it's really, I mean, all of these elements can be extremely powerful in creating an emotional response, and in turn telling a story that hopefully matters. But I love that, and I've always loved really strong, powerful music and war movies, and of course documentaries.
Yeah, I think it's quite an underrated thing. I think everyone is so aware of visuals, but I think people more often than not will neglect the sound, or even just Foley sounds. If we're talking filmmaking, and it goes such a long way when you just watch it with the sound off, and you realize just how much of an impact sound is making. I mean, I know I'm not a sound guy, but I like to think I know enough to appreciate it. At the same time, it's not kind of my thing, but yeah, it really does account for so much when you're watching film, as you said, especially for horror, when you're trying to create a certain emotional response and that tension. So yeah, it's very, very cool.
Yeah, or just the ability to make you feel what the character's feeling in the movie when, for example, and their mom's dying of cancer and you're in the room with them, and they use music to make you feel like you're in their body experiencing. I love that stuff. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, and then color grading too. It's another form of that. Very powerful, right? If you are making a movie that's where you're strolling through the Arctic and you're about to die, you make the colors feel really cold.
Yeah.
And then the person who's watching is like, ugh. And then when they come back at the end, I think of scene from Lord of the Rings, after all is said and done and Frodo's laying in the bed, all the colors are really warm because it's a happy moment, right? All of that's really fascinating and really powerful. But my wife, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna refer to The Sixth Sense. How that was one of the first movies I ever watched in media studies at school, and that was when I got my love for filmmaking, specifically when my teacher was talking about the iconographic objects and color and the use of color in that film. How that red is so powerful, and how it really opened my eyes up, because I was so oblivious to that way of thinking in filmmaking, like even just down to something silly like having a higher camera angle looking down on you makes the character look weak and subordinate. Like I never thought of that. Like it's all these subliminal, subtle things that you're thinking of when you're watching a film that you almost don't realize that as a filmmaker you need to know and need to be aware of. It's like a psychology with it, and I find that fascinating. How you can make someone think a certain thing through color grading and camera angles or camera focal length. So it's all of these things that make a bigger picture. So yeah, it's fascinating.
Well, I think it's another thing is the camera in itself is a character, because if you watch a movie and a camera lingers in one spot, a shot lingers in one spot for a little bit longer than you expected, you go, I need to be paying attention. Something's about to happen.
Yes.
The camera itself has a lot of power. And I watched a video about that the other day. I never thought about it on that level before. I think I've always sort of subconsciously thought about that, which is what's so interesting to think about, is that most people take these sort of cues in subconsciously, but if you think about it, you can take them in consciously, and then you can recreate them consciously, and then appeal to other people subconsciously. But I love the power of the camera angle and making a movie, and like you said, that getting down low, pointing up on somebody if you want them to feel heroic, and pointing down on them, or if you want to them to rain coming down if you want it to feel like they're depressed, and this sort of thing. So that's exciting. Yeah, I didn't think we would go off on a movie making tangent.
No, it's fine. I mean, I have a degree in it. I'm fascinated. I love movies. Again, I think that's one of the things, just to kind of transition maybe into more relevant topic. I think it's it helps me with the knowledge I have and the love I have for film, helped me with my YouTube content and using it to drive making my behind the scenes video what they are and make them better. Because it allows me then to combine both loves. I can have my friend, I can direct my friend who's filming me. It's direct. I can block the scene and we can talk about it. And we've worked together for now years, and so he knows how I work very well. So we've got we're a great team, and yeah. So because I'm so involved with that process, we're able to. We have the knowledge behind us. We know about frame rates. We know about focal lengths. We know how to create a story visually through moving images, not just stills. Because you have a lot of stills photographers that now in this day and age that almost have to now embrace video. They kind of have to, really, because it's just a medium. Video is a medium that we know is just the best media out there that to get your message across, because it just does so much better than a photo, and a photo does better than a status update. But at the top of all that, I think it's video. You can get everything in a video. You can get sound, you can get sound effects, you get music, you get your pictures obviously in there and tell the story. So that's why I think that photographers, if they haven't embraced video, they need to embrace it to just really help them grow as a photographer, especially from a marketing point of view, certainly.
Mm-hmm. I think the video is such a good way to help a photographer. Help that if they're trying to teach somebody the craft of photography, it's absolutely crucial, because it has such a you're able to pull so many elements together in a visual way that help communicate to the person that you're speaking to in a way that doesn't feel like they have to read 11 paragraphs to understand, but you can condense it into something that feels very tangible, understandable. And that's really interesting. See, I've never went fully down the rabbit hole of a photographer has to learn video, because I suppose it depends on what you do. But yeah. I also think that I think that learning how to edit a video, at least on a basic level, in our society right now, is up there with learning how to, I don't know, write code, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, when I was at school, it was the first year when you pick your options to do your final exams in secondary school. It was the first year that they had made language non-compulsory and computers compulsory, which was fine for me because I like using a computer, but I was actually quite glad because I didn't want to learn French for another 2 or 3 years. So but it's interesting that it's probably because, the day and age we live in, that, you have to embrace using a computer at the very least, because it's, they're just everywhere. You can't avoid it. But yeah, I do agree. I think, having that basic knowledge of just cutting something up, I think, is very valuable as a photographer. I think at one point or another you're going to get asked, aren't you? Do you shoot video as well? I guarantee every photographer will be asked that. And it was before we went online, I was talking about UB40. How I got the job of working with this band was the photographer of this band said to him, "Oh, do you shoot video as well?" And he reluctantly said, yeah, I do." And then he asked me if I would help out. And even someone like him, who's very established photographer, shooting celebrity bands, he even gets asked to shoot video. And I guarantee it's just because of the day and age we live in. So I think you really do have to embrace it and have some basic knowledge on editing.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing, because I'm curious your viewpoint on this, because I don't live in the freelance photography world so much. And I think that there are two different worlds, right? You have the photographer who shares on Instagram and maybe makes YouTube videos as well. This is segment one over here. And then over here, you have the more traditional route of photography, where you're going and taking photos of couples, or you're a birth photographer, or a food photographer, product photographer, this and that. And do you think it's necessary to learn video in order to diversify yourself, so that you can sort of, I don't know, like, I wonder if the photographer should be really, really good at one thing.
No, I hear what you're saying. I think maybe to rephrase it then, I think it's a great thing to have in the tool bag, or it's a great aid, a marketing aid, purely because of algorithms on social media, is that video just does better than stills. That's a fact. At least it is anyway at this point. So yeah, I think I guess it does help diversify you as well. I believe it's made me a better photographer, and also photography has made me a better filmmaker. Oh, yeah. I think it definitely goes hand in hand. So I think, yeah, what I meant was that I mean, you could perfectly have a career without doing video, but I think it helps. I think it does help.
And it's also a good way to help people, because if someone is trying to work with you as their photographer, a huge strength that you can bring to the table is your personality, if you have one. I think most of us have one. And if you can figure out a way to get on video and make yourself look halfway decent and communicate, like when you send people to your landing page, they click a video and it's like, "Hi, I'm Tommy, and I would love to shoot, your wedding, take the best photos you've ever seen in your life. This is my philosophy. I don't have a short temper. I won't punch any of the bridesmaids in the face," and all of this stuff. And then they watch this and they go, "Man, this guy looks like a stand-up fellow. He doesn't look like he's going to come to the wedding with drugs, And I think for that reason alone, it's a fantastic tool. Like, I think my wife actually got a job because of our YouTube channel that we share. Her boss, the one that ended up hiring her, saw her videos, and he made YouTube videos as well. So he got a handle for her personality from her videos. And I think that's hugely powerful.
Oh, 100%. I think, exactly what you said. It really does show off your personality. I did I did a long talk on this, which is on my YouTube channel, but I'll tell a very brief version. But I was invited to the photography show in Birmingham this year, and I spoke about how you can earn money doing what you love, and one of the main things you can do to do that, or to certainly to gain affiliation with brands, is to show them your personality. And my behind the scenes videos, whilst at the start that wasn't the intention was just to make cool video for my channel because I wanted to share it because I thought it would look cool. I was able to use that as a marketing tool. It was never the intention to use it as a marketing tool at first, and it shouldn't be, because what you do should be born out of love. You should want to do it because you love doing it, not because you know it's going to make you money. But it transpired into using my behind the scenes video to use it as a marketing tool. And I gave it to Pixapro, which is a lighting company here based in the UK that I'm really affiliated with. And if you follow my work, you'll know of Pixapro because I mention them all the time in my geek part. But I approached them with I think at this point I'd made 2 behind the scenes videos, both personal projects. And I gave them the videos and said, "Would you like to collaborate? Can I borrow some gear? And I will do something similar to what I've done here." And they said yes. They pretty much gave me the catalogue and said, "What do you want to borrow?" And I spoke to the head of the company and said, out of curiosity, way back when we first started collaborating, because we're going back about 2 or 3 years now, I said, "Would you have collaborated with me if you hadn't seen the behind the scenes videos? If we were just going on the photos, would you still have taken a chance?" And he went, "I probably wouldn't have." And I said, "And why is that?" And he said, "It's because the videos, like, we could see your personality, we could see what you're about, we could see that we knew that by giving you the gear, we could see that you'd look after it. You just get a flavor for someone when you see a behind the scenes video." And not even just a video. I'm such an advocate and a preacher of people doing personal work and people showing their work. Those are the 2 main things that I wanted to communicate with your audience, is that I'm someone, and I want them to know, I want them to encourage them to create personal work and to get out of that comfort zone. When you were saying about how talking about people who specifically are freelancers doing this, I think it's even more important if you're a freelancer to do personal work, because it's so easy to be a working professional and get stuck in that rut and doing the same old thing all the time, doing maybe headshot corporate shots, because it is so easy to fall into that trap, because you know it works, but at the same time you'll get bored very easily because it's a go-to and it's an easy go-to. but you can't challenge yourself creatively because you're just doing the same old thing over and over. And because you're now in this new bracket over here where you're getting paid to do what you do, you don't want to take a chance and do something that what's the word? You don't want to you don't want to take a chance trying something new with a paying client in case you mess up, because you don't want to look silly. But back when you were over here, when you were an amateur, when you're a hobbyist, you didn't mind about messing up because it's all part of the learning process. It was fun, and it should still be fun, and it should be fun when you're still over here. And I think in order to keep it fun and to keep learning and to keep progressing, you need to do personal work. And that's now why I do one personal project a month, regardless of, so it's my shoot, my concept, something I want to do creatively. And I have just now kind of fell into this kind of thing where I'm using my personal work to work with brands. And now I'm trying to become more associated with getting paid to do my personal work, getting paid to do what I love. Now I'm in a very great position where Pixapro fund my personal work. In exchange, I use this modifier this month and that modifier next month. And that's how it kind of transitioned with the traveling side of things. How Olympus recently in Ethiopia, they endorsed that trip. But if we rewind, they only endorsed that because it was born out of a personal project and doing something that I loved, because I went to Sri Lanka and India first out of my own back, paid it for myself. So yeah, it's another digression. I apologize, but it's...
No, quite all right. I love the digressions. I have not been disappointed with a single one of these digressions. Keep it up.
Fantastic. That's good to know. But yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot what your question was, but I think, yeah, when as a working professional, you have to do personal work, because you will more than likely get stuck in that rut and you won't realize it until you're there and you think, shit, why am I only getting called up to do headshot corporate stuff? Why isn't no one calling me up to do something really creative?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what was your last 5 jobs? Well, they're all corporate headshots. Okay. And so
what's on your website?
And what's on your website? Oh, it's all headshots. No one's going to hire you to do that thing that you love, because no one knows you do that thing you love. Mm-hmm. So you really have to show what you're worth and show that you can do it. And to prove it to the world, you've got to do it yourself. You've got to prove it to us. No one's going to take a chance on you. John Lewis isn't going to hire you to shoot this campaign if they've never seen anything that you've done similarly to that. So it's, yeah.
I think that it's like, whether you're doing freelance work or whether you're building an audience of people that you want to follow you, which often takes a lot longer to do, I think the key beginning point is to build an ever more impressive body of work for people to stumble upon and for you to send people to. When you're saying, I want to, if I want to talk about your product on my video, I have, I just made it to 20,000 followers, and and maybe you can pay me a little bit for this thing and send me a watch, right? You're going to send them to the closest thing to that. And whenever I reach out to people like you to have conversations with, I send you what I feel like was a really solid conversation that you can go and get a reference point. So that way it's not just me sending you a message on Instagram and saying, hey, I like to talk with people about creative things and put it on my YouTube channel. Like you have a reference point for the quality, for my personality. I'm not going to bring drugs to the conversation once again. And
exactly. And you linked me to Sean Tucker's interview or talk you gave, which is ironic because I saw him like 2 days before or after that you sent me that, because me and Sean are going to be collaborating in a couple of months, and I adore Sean's vision and his approach on the world, as I'm sure anyone else who follows him, everyone has that same fear. He's got a very, very solid brand, and
he's got a very unique style, very moody.
Absolutely. It's something that it's a conversation that I've had recently with him, and it's not something I've actually spoken to a lot of people about, but since speaking with Sean, I want to take a slightly different approach to my YouTube channel, because back in January and up until maybe 3 or 4 months into the new year, I was posting one video a week. And I've now decided, since speaking with Sean, that I'm actually going to slow that down. So I don't want to do one video a week now, because I want to now create videos that are a little bit more meaning and take a little bit more time. And because I realized that looking back at my last kind of few videos, with the exceptions of a couple of talks, they've been videos where like tip videos, and I don't want to get in a habit of doing too many of them. I want to balance it with, so videos that I am truly proud of are the interview I did with my nan, the photo shoot I did with Alf Hunt, the World War II veteran, and an interview or a documentary which I am about to release next month of a guy called James Dunn, who had, unfortunately, he passed away a couple of months ago. He had epidermolysis bullosa, which was a skin condition, and he was interviewed by the BBC. He was part of a BBC documentary called The Big Life Fix, in which he wasn't able to use his camera anymore. So the BBC and a team of experts built this camera rig to attach to his wheelchair, and he was now able to use his camera via an iPad. He could literally pan, zoom, move it. He can change the settings all from his iPad because his fingers had been fused together. And I saw that and I was so inspired by it. And I contacted him and then said, James, I would love to come up and meet you. And I want to teach you how to use your camera in manual mode. And he said, that would be amazing. And I said, can I bring up my guy to come and film the experience? And he went, yeah, absolutely. And we did it, and we premiered it at my local cinema, my local Odeon, which was an amazing feeling. And we're releasing it to YouTube next week. And the point of that story was, that is another example of something that I am truly, truly proud of, and something that will last the test of time. And referencing Sean's video that you did with him, I totally agree how you look at my portfolio, and I don't shoot an awful, I don't do boudoir. That's not my thing. And not to discourage people that do shoot that, but I don't believe there's an awful lot of storytelling there versus talking to Alf Hunt.
There's definitely a visual story.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Definitely a visual story, but obviously it's just it's personal preference, of course, isn't it? And and it's not what excites me. What excites me is the storytelling aspect, and I feel like that that is going to be a slightly different direction going forward. My YouTube will have, hopefully, is the stuff that I've done with Alf, where we had this formula where I would interview him, and in between you cut to B-roll. And the B-roll is slow motion footage of me photographing him and the shots that we get from that. So rewinding back to when I started doing behind the scenes videos, it would be cinematic, no talking. It was just kind of all like nicely filmed, just so you can get a sense of what I'm doing. And now it's got this interview overlay over the top, which adds more layers, adds the cherry on the cake. And that, I feel, is now getting far more engagement because you're adding so many more layers to it. There's something for everyone. There's documentary, there's photography there. You're learning something, and it's engaging. There's music, that you can use. So I feel like that's a direction now that I want to diverse my YouTube. I'm going to still do some of these tip videos because I think they're great for the channel. It's a good way to encourage new audiences. It's almost like a YouTube musician doing covers, and then once you're in, you can then hopefully they'll explore your channel and see your original work. And this is what, I guess, this is the photography version of it. I do tip videos to pull in new people, because unfortunately, as we know, and as me and Sean know, we were when we met, that something like that James documentary I've made will not get as many hits as my 5 ways to use a single softbox. It's just the nature of the beast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then, I think people don't like to think sometimes. So that's where some of that comes from, is they want the most digestible version of the thing. And that's always, that has always had the highest mass appeal on a societal level.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah, I get messaged all the time, people asking me, what's the best lens to get? What's the best softbox to get for this. And while I'm happy obviously to give advice, but it's like it's not the most important thing. Like, you can get away with any softbox, you know, relatively, but they want to know specifically what you use. Oh, so but what was your aperture? I mean, in hindsight, it doesn't really matter. I did my geek part at the bottom of my photo, so I had a reference, so I could go back. It's not really for anyone else, it's for me. And there have been a couple of times where I've wanted to recreate a shot in the studio because the client has referenced it on my Instagram, and I've had to go back to that image and be like, what did I use? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't, you knowing what I shot, you're still not going to be able to go away and recreate that, because, you know, there's other factors, you know, depends on the lighting conditions in the room. Like, it could be totally different to what I had, so it's not going to be the same. So, but yeah, no,
you have to ask yourself if you're as an artist, if you're asking the right questions, because if you're asking questions about gear, and if you're asking questions like what softbox did Tommy use, your photos will get incrementally better technically, but they will not get more meaningful because of that. Right. And so I think I heard somebody say that a good teacher, something along the lines of a good teacher helps the student understand the right questions to ask more than they give them the answers. Right.
Yes.
And I think that's a really powerful thought. But I love to talk about meaning on here and pursuing meaning with your work, because I think a lot of people they spend a lot of time creating pretty things because they're fun to do. And that has its value, of course. But
sure.
I love what you were talking about with your documentary. What was his name again?
His name's James Dunn.
Okay, yes, James Dunn. I love how you're taking this thing that started with you in your school. You got interest in photography, and now you're spending time trying to do something that you feel like is meaningful and has impact. And I think that's the right question to ask, right? How do you turn this fun hobby into that? And I've always loved Jeremy Cowart, his work, and his photography is great, but it's like, what I remember him for is, for one, he did a series in Haiti right after the earthquake, where he got people to hold up pieces of rubble, I think it was, and write with a Sharpie their thoughts about the earthquake. And this blew my mind. This was such a powerful photo project, an example of how you can take a photo which can be hard to insert meaning into a lot of times on a daily basis. Right. If you go spend some time in Afghanistan or something, you're probably going to find some meaning. But on a daily basis, for a lot of us, it's kind of hard to come across that. You really have to put some thought into it. And what he did there was amazing. You have people just telling their story of what happened in their town. You see buildings crumbled behind them. I was actually, I looked back at it when I was in Haiti at one point, and I was feeling discouraged. I just looked back and I was like, this is why I'm here. This is what I'm trying to do. And so there's that. Right now, he's done plenty of other things. I think he's building a hotel at this point.
The Inspire Hotel. But before you move on, I just wanted to catch on to what you're saying. I think it's important to the whole thing about holding the signs up. That's the context, and I think that context is so important. Context is the behind the scenes. It's the creative process. He could have just photographed that guy standing there, and it just would have been a picture of a guy standing there. That element adds so much context to it, and it's that element, it's the context that I like to insert. So one of my influencers now is Brandon Stanton, who runs the blog Humans of New York. So what Jeremy was doing there was the equivalent of that guy. Rather than writing in the captions, they were writing it on this bit of paper. Again, looking at Brandon's work, while it's not photographing anyone in like third world countries, it's just normal people in New York. If you again just to see a picture of a random guy in New York, there's not a lot of meaning there until you read the caption, and it's reading that caption that adds so much value and context to it. You feel like you get to know that person more, and that's why I like to add a really big caption. I like to again, when I go to India or Sri Lanka, I don't just photograph them. I want to know, right, I get my notes app out of my phone. I say, what's your name, how old are you, how long have you been doing this job, what struggles are you going through right now? And then when I then post that image, I kind of believe that the reason why you probably like that photo is probably because of the context as well. I think what I've written has helped you like the photo a little bit more than the photo itself, because it's the creative process. It's like I was talking to my friend actually about this, because I was way back when I was thinking of maybe becoming a teacher, teaching photography, and my teacher saying, you know, you have to follow a certain curriculum from getting them from A to B, but how you get them from A to B, this bit in the middle, is up to you, and it's that makes you unique. You can take that. Me and James, me and you could take this picture, the same picture, but how we take it could be different, and that's the unique bit. And it's in that unique bit that I like to film and show that creative process, and that's what makes me unique, and that's what shows the context. And context can add value to your work, and it can be the difference between you getting hired as well. So there's a great book, I totally recommend any photographer to read it, called Show Your Work by Austin Kleon. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's a fantastic book, and he describes, and this is how context is so important. Let's just say, James, that you're in an art gallery and you're an art buyer, so you know your stuff, and you see it, two paintings on the wall. True. And there's two paintings on the wall. They look exactly the same, and you've got to go up, because you're like, even down to the brush strokes, these guys look the same.
Close to the camera. He has his hand on his lip. Just for anyone who's listening, I have to give them context. It's very important.
Yeah, hang on. Hang on. Let's just like bring the lighting a little bit more moody.
He's got the strong light, a spotlight on his face.
That's it. See.
Is there any way you could make your camera black and white for this moment?
Oh, I wish. we got a nice bit of blue rim coming in from
some dark noir.
Yeah, hang on, and maybe you can do that in post for me. Go black and white now.
I'll go get right. I'll get that, and I'll go get some 1940s soap opera music.
Yeah. See, I'm sure you can find it on Epidemic Music.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
No, sorry. So these two art pieces on the wall. We digress. We're good at this, aren't we? And you've got to ask the guy that works there, what's the difference between these two paintings here? And he says, well, the one on the left was painted in the 18th century by a very well-known painter by the name of who's a very well-known painter, you know. And over on the right was painted by a student last week who wanted to see if he could recreate it. Now, even though they're exactly the same, James, what one would you rather have hanging on your wall?
I'll take the one from that.
Yeah.
That one seems like it has a bit more emotional weight to it.
But even though they will look exactly the same on your wall, you would rather take home this guy, because when people come round and ask about it, you're going to give them the context, you're going to give them the story, you're going to give them the meaning. And it's everything I've just said there is what I like to put in my behind the scenes videos. You add context, you add meaning, you add value, you add uniqueness. Because you've got a story there. Everyone loves a story, and that's again why I love my behind the scenes videos, because it allows me to flex my filmmaking muscles, because I don't do an awful lot of filmmaking work, because there's not as much money in filmmaking as there is in my case anyway, than my photography. I get far more photography work than music video work, because when it comes to music videos, there's always a need for a much greater budget than a photo shoot. And with a music video, I'm going to need a team, we're going to need resources, materials, more time, etc. So that's why for me it doesn't come around as often, filmmaking jobs. So that's why these behind the scenes videos allow me to kind of flex my filmmaking muscles.
Very good. Very good. That's good stuff, man. So we have about 15 more minutes before we both have to get back to work, or whatever you're going to be doing. I have to get back to work. Also, very quickly, I must say that I'm glad you're here today because you were telling me beforehand that your axle exploded on the road on the way
Yes.
home and you almost died. And I'm glad you're here with us today. I would have been having a very lonely conversation.
You just would have been chatting to this lamp behind me, just this very moody lamp.
It's a great lamp. I mean, really.
I mean, it's pretty cool, isn't it?
But just it has a little bit less personality and engagement than I would say.
Yeah, that's true.
It doesn't laugh as much.
No, I do have quite a big grin.
Yeah. Okay, so with this last couple of minutes, even though I did want to get into your speaking, maybe if we get back together again another time, we'll talk more about that. But I wanted to talk about your trip to Ethiopia.
Yes.
And I think hopefully we'll have a perfect amount of time to get through that in a really, really lovely and all-inclusive type of manner, I suppose. But first off, I watched I think it's your latest one on your channel where you were speaking in front of a crowd and you were telling the story of this trip. And I found it absolutely fascinating. But first off, before we get into what happened involving, I suppose a couple of AK-47s and some not good times.
It's a hoot of a story.
I bet, yeah. I mean, anytime you have an AK-47 in a story, it's the entertainment value goes way up.
Oh yeah.
But first off, how did the trip come about?
So carrying on with my personal work, like wanting to do personal projects. I like to do one big travel trip a year because I just love traveling. It's another one of my loves. Music's one and traveling's another. So I love to shoot environmental portraits abroad, usually in Asia, because I love that part of the world. And I wanted to explore Africa. I'd never been to Africa before. So I was Googling around some tribes and some very interesting kind of cultures and people in Africa, and came across the Oma Valley in southern Ethiopia. So I looked into kind of pricing, how much it was going to cost, and I learned very quickly that it was going to be maybe too much money for me to afford. And I'd kind of like put the feelers out on social media that this may be my next trip. And then when I realized that it was going to be too much money, I was thinking that people were just going to forget about it, because I thought I'm probably not going to be able to go now. But Olympus saw various different social media mentions of it and contacted me and said, we would like to sponsor your trip to Ethiopia, budget permitting. So can you pitch us what you hope to get, and we'll let you know if we can accommodate, obviously on the assumption that you use our camera. Their flagship model is currently at the time of recording is the EM1 Mark II. And so it was a case where, not to sound disrespectful to Olympus, but it was, I either go with Olympus or I don't go at all, because I couldn't afford to go. So I was so happy and blessed with the opportunity that they were going to pay for it. So yeah, I went with Olympus, but and this is something I have not really spoken about online, but I had a lot of anxiety before that. So because I'm going to a country or a continent I've never been before, using a camera I've never used before, and this is the first time a travel trip has been sponsored, so I didn't want to let them down. And I was also planning on delivering 11 talks at the photography show about it. And I thought, what if this goes wrong? There's so much for me to lose here. So I'm so glad that most of the trip went well, and I was able to come back with a good behind the scenes video and a bunch of cool photos that I'm really proud of. So how
did you deal with that pressure? Do you like coffee? Did that help?
Yes, because do you know what? I actually only started drinking coffee in the last kind of 6 months, and Ethiopia's where it was born. That was where it was, came from. So I drank a lot of coffee there, and oh my God, the coffee there is amazing. I was buzzing. Sunday, I was so buzzing. But I was saying to I hosted a.
You're just running around kicking over houses in the village, and they're like, man, we gotta get out of here. This is amazing.
No wonder I was nearly kept hostage. It was no, just to kind of only because I've never mentioned this online before, but I was talking to my girlfriend Emily, and I said I was like almost in tears about going. I was literally like 5 minutes about to leave to go to the airport, and I was really upset because I I thought, and I said to her, I should be happy right now, but I'm not,
Mm.
because I felt so anxious to do a good job because there was so much riding on this. And I had a lot of support with Alex, who came with me to Ethiopia. So he was, it was very, I'm so glad that I had him with me on this trip. He was a great support, and obviously a great help in supporting not just me, but also my light, holding my light as well. So so that's,
every
so that's
man needs a good
around.
light holder.
Oh yeah, he's my go-to voice activated light stand. He's certainly got the height for it. Or maybe I'm just very short. It's probably a bit of both.
Okay, so first off, before we get into when things went wrong, what did you find? What was interesting to you about Ethiopia?
So as a portrait photographer, it's obviously the people, and because that part of the world, Asia included, have such diverse culture to how we live. It's so different to how we live, and part of the storytelling aspect to my photos, when I talk about their story in the captions, is exactly that. I wanted to learn about it's the poorest country I've ever visited, and I just wanted to see how they live, what their outlook on life is. Are they aware of how we as Westerners live? And to go out there and just take some really cool pictures to add to my portfolio, it was also, and just another element to it. But yeah, just to meet some really cool, interesting people, find out their stories, and just to experience their culture is what I love to do.
What did you observe about their general happiness?
It depends on, because we visited about 5 or 6 different tribes which are scattered all around southern Ethiopia. So each tribe was like a 5-hour trip in between. So in 5 hours, you can walk into totally different kind of atmosphere, I think is the right word, because there were some atmospheres that were quite hostile, and others that were really chilled, really cool. You really get a sense as a, if you're a good people person, and I think most people would be able to get a vibe, and you certainly got a vibe with some tribes compared to others. So there were some tribes where you had to physically be assisted with a guy with an AK. That was called the Mercy tribe. This is the tribe, as you may know, where they have the lip plates.
Okay.
So they were quite hostile and very kind of defensive, whereas the Ari tribe were really cool, down to earth, super chilled, and for that reason we stayed longer, interacted longer. So you kind of just, as a people person, you kind of use your instinct and know when you've outstayed your welcome and it's time to go.
Was there any hostility towards you as a white person showing up with a camera trying to take photos of them?
I don't think so, because we were with a guide, and because the guide who was with us, and this is a tip that I always give people: if you're doing anything like I do, always have a guide with you, because they open up doors that you never knew existed. And so I think that gives the people in tribes and people around you a bit of comfort, knowing that there is a local, and this guide does it all the time. So he knows the tribes, some of the people by name, and he goes up and says hello to them as if they're old friends, even though we're going all over the country, because he does it all the time. So rare, not hostility, not so much, apart from one incident. But for everything else, it was more because they saw you with a camera and you're white, you're probably have got money. They expect to be paid for every single photograph, which was a little bit of a downside that I don't talk about too much online. Was that it was a little bit like let's talk about business after the photo, which is obviously what you don't see in the video. I'm not going to show that in the video, but that was a reality, was that after a photograph was taken, there was always a negotiation of how much to pay them, because while if you're a normal tourist or with an iPhone or with just a basic camera phone, that click, that would be it, 5 birr, that's it. Whereas with us, we've got a softbox. They know that we've probably got more money. I'm spending maybe 2 minutes of their time rather than 1 click of their time. So they expect more money, but other people expected different sums. So there was always that bit of negotiating game. That's as far as hostility, if you like. I wouldn't even call it that. It's just it's what they expect, because some of these tribes rely on tourists tips, and that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure that a lot of that came from people watching, National Geographic documentaries about these tribes who, they put the plates in their lips, or you have the tribe that they'll put the rings on their neck, and they're just incredibly eclectic, interesting people. And I wonder what they think of us, because when we show up from America or from Europe, we bring cameras, period. Right. So that's just going to be part of the situation. And I wonder what they think about that. I wonder if they go, where is this going to be? Right. When I was in Haiti, it was like I felt in the air that there was a general openness on one hand, but there was also a general just, skepticism. Like what's he up to? Right. And
for sure.
Now I had long red hair, and you don't see a lot of guys with long red hair in Haiti. And so I would, I'd bring up my camera and try to take a photo, or I would ask or whatever. And well, for one, you learn how far a smile goes.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, no. Did you have a guide, James?
We had people that we were staying with. So whenever we actually ventured out, we had people around us that spoke the language and this sort of thing. Now, I didn't go into places. I didn't speak to people and say, hey, I'm going to go take photos here. Help me take photos. I was sort of with other people, and I was managing on my own. So there was, maybe some limitation to that, but we sort of were told, hey, this is what you can do, and this is maybe don't do this. Mainly don't go out, at night. Right.
Yeah.
But what was interesting is you get these two polar opposites. You get the sort of skepticism, and I think mainly in Port-au-Prince, which is the capital, which is where the earthquake struck the hardest. I didn't experience too much of this, but I remember in Jeremy Cowart's video about his portrait series there, he was saying that there was just there was maybe a little bit of frustration with photographers, because whenever that happened, when the earthquake first happened, there were hundreds of photographers showing up, taking their photo, and then leaving. And so if you live in Haiti, you're like, okay, what does this mean for me as somebody who lives here? Like, you just took my photo. What, I can imagine what they would think. And so I think maybe that lingered by the time I got there, and I got a little bit of that. But yeah, I think they're just normal people like us, but you have to be aware of the circumstances, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the same in not just Haiti, but in Africa where I was, is that it's a tribe that does get visited more often than I thought, to be honest, by tourists. So there is that kind of I totally get what you're saying, but whereas what's maybe a little bit different about me is that I won't just take their picture and then go away. I want to now sit down with them, and that's the inspiration I get from Brandon Stanton, is I want to spend a bit of time with them or get to know them, and so that they feel more comfortable with me. So that there have been occasions, and maybe we'll talk about it in the next one, but where I've built up relationships over the course of a week in Sri Lanka with fishermen. I actually posted a picture of a fisherman on my Instagram a couple of days ago. But
writing that down right now, because that sounds like that's going to be some amazing stuff.
It's cool, but I was only able to gain that trust. Actually, no, it was almost a year in the making, because I go for 3 years. I went every year to Sri Lanka with a charity, and on the first year I met this guy. We got a relationship, and then it was the second year seeing him again, and I went back with a print, and I said, look, this is a print from last year. And I also gave him a wristband, one of my Tommy Reynolds wristbands as well. And when I gave it to him, he was like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then I looked down at his wrist, and he's wearing my wristband. He'd been wearing it for a year. He didn't know I was coming. And that was really special to me. And I said, can I photograph your boys out fishing? And usually they would charge tourists £100 to experience that. And I got it for free. And the fishermen were so friendly and really welcoming too. There was no hostility with my camera whatsoever. And it was because I earned their trust. And that is so important. if you're
Yeah, it's
lucky
all
enough
about
to
taste.
have that. Well, obviously, if I was in Africa on this one occasion, I mean, I could go back and I could see the same people and probably would get an even better portrait. But in case I don't, you always want to try and, approach, as you said, a smile goes a long way. Don't walk in with the camera right here or with the softbox ready to go. Everything's packed away. We're very warm, welcoming, and then you earn the trust and get the camera out and then start shooting. And then, yeah.
Very good. Okay. And then things went wrong.
And then things went a little bit south. Yeah.
Or sideways, as I like to say.
Yeah, it went, it was miscommunication, getting the wrong end of the stick. They were a bit drunk, but basically, I'll give you the short version. But we were photographing one of the tribes. It was it'll come back to me. We were photographing one of the tribes, and these two guys rocked up on motorbikes, and they were very upset. They were friends of the tribe, and they were very upset that we had this big softbox out, because they were then demanding a professional permit fee, which we weren't aware of, and they were very upset. And they said, "You have to stop. We need to leave." I'm like, okay, fine. We just thought we'd stayed a welcome, and our accommodation was only around the corner. And so when we got round the corner back to accommodation, they had followed us back and said, you have to follow us. We need to escort you to the bureau because you need to talk about what's just happened. We're not happy with you at all. So we're really scared at this point. So
that's the part where I would be like, I'm just gonna run that way into the field.
Yeah,
if I can get away.
And I feel like I'm making this sound a bit tamer than it was, because they were shouting constantly. So I took the trigger off my camera.
Did they have guns in their hands at this point?
At this point, no, they didn't have guns, but they had machetes. Equally
as intimidating.
Yes, yeah. The AKs weren't out yet, but they were near. So I'm trying to make my camera look as insignificant as possible. So I'm kind of glad I took the mirrorless system out with me. So I had a pancake lens. I took the battery grip off, took the trigger off. So when I walked into the bureau,
Thanks, Olympus.
Save my buns. And I thought the bureau would be this nice building, but it was actually just a dingy little shack in the middle of nowhere, which actually made it even more scary. So we sat down, really dark. Me and Alex are sat opposite each other, like, what are we gonna do? Like, cue the moody light again.
Yeah.
And our guide was there. He's trying to like console them, and the two guys that rocked up on motorbikes were there, shouting like, "These guys are taking the piss" or something. And they were like hitting my back, like, "Go and get the softbox. Prove it to the head of the bureau that you shouldn't be using this stuff." And so we're really scared, upset, frustrated, nervous. And in the end, Alex turned to Caleb, who was the name of our guide, and said, what can we do to make this right? And they said, you have to pay. And we kind of saw that one coming. And they said, you have to pay 5,000 birr, which is the equivalent of £200. So I'm so scared.
Was there a point in this where you thought, I might not leave the shack?
I did wonder. Do you know what? Actually, such a photographer, I was more concerned about my hard drive than my own. Yes,
you are indeed a photographer.
I'm definitely a photographer, because I looked out of the door and I saw a bunch of guys hanging around our van, and I thought, God, please don't break into our van, because that's where my hard drive is with all of the images we've taken. Because this is right at the end of the trip.
They come in and they go, "You don't have to pay anymore."
Yeah, we'll just take the hard drive. I'm like, so we didn't have the money, so we couldn't pay. We didn't have $200. Our guide didn't have the money, so they gave us a 24-hour grace period to pay. Otherwise, we were, or else what? So I'll be in very shortly. Sorry. Sorry, you can cut that.
You're good. So you were saying that they gave you a 24-hour grace period, and now you have to pay tomorrow.
Yeah. So we didn't have so we went back to our accommodation, and I didn't feel safe because there was this money that was, you know, pending, that was hanging over us. So they followed us back to our accommodation, and that's when AKs were around and stuff. And
did you ask? Did you ask what would happen if you know, you didn't show up tomorrow? Was there was there any indication of what would happen?
I didn't want to ask either, to be honest. I knew it was going to get paid because we just needed to wait for the bank to open. So we, when the bank opened, we didn't sleep that night. And Alex slept with the monopod that we were using to hold the softbox up. He slept with it next to his bed, like that was going to stop us. But I didn't sleep at all. He didn't sleep at all. And the next morning, we went to the bank. We paid up.
You guys are in there learning how to make prison shanks out of the bed frame.
I'm like writing home, but tell my mom I love her. But
we're gonna attempt to get away with a sharpened toothbrush. We're gonna hope for the best.
Pretty much, yeah. But we paid and it was fine, and yeah, so I was so glad to be home. Luckily that happened at the end of the trip, but the full if I may plug, if you want to
plug
hear the full version of this story, where I go into a little bit more detail, then you can find the full like 20-minute video. It's interesting that people responded more, because that was originally like a half an hour talk on the day, talking about Ethiopia, and like the what went wrong bit was the end segment. And it's funny how that got so much more engagement, because people want to know what went wrong versus what went right, because it's everyone just shows off their highlights, but it's very rare that people show off their what went wrong, you know, their vulnerability, because as Brene Brown says, vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. And
absolutely,
in a roundabout way, to kind of round it up, it's by showing that vulnerability and telling people what really happened. I think people kind of maybe related to me a little bit more, and you know, things go wrong for me. You know, I may paint a pretty picture on Instagram or whatever, like so many of us do, but you know, things do go wrong, and I think it's important to show off or even just to tell people that.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Okay, well, this is a good spot to wrap it up. Thanks for sharing your terrifying life-changing ordeal with us involving machetes and AK-47s. We're all better for it.
Thank you. No, thank you very much, James. I really appreciate it. Thank you for asking me to give this chat.
Absolutely. I would, of course, I would love to do this again, and I feel like there is definitely more that we can talk about. But okay, that's it. Links below for anybody. I would love to hear your thoughts, everybody. Thank you so much again, Tommy. I hope everyone has a lovely day, and hopefully we get to do this again sometime. And goodbye.